Your brain evolved to do one thing above all else, to keep you alive. And it's really, really good at it. So good that when it finds something that brings relief, like alcohol, substances, screens, even work, it can lock onto that pattern and it won't let go. I'm Ryan Soave, a trauma and addiction therapist, and I myself got sober about 18 years ago. The thing that most people get wrong about addiction is it's not the problem. It's the solution. It's the solution to something deeper, something that you might not even be able to name yet. And so if you want to heal from addiction, the question to start with is, what is it trying to protect you from? I believe one of our biggest problems as human beings is that we often confuse discomfort with threat, and we respond to something that's uncomfortable as if it's something life-threatening. You see, our brain's job is not to seek happiness. Our brain's job is not to find peace. Primarily, our brain's job is survival. Because if we don't survive, if we're not alive, we can't experience happiness. We can't experience peace. We don't experience anything. And so the brain will respond to threat and perceived threat in very similar and sometimes the same ways. In this way, if an uncomfortable situation or a challenging emotion is perceived as threat, then we'll go into this survival state. And in that survival state, we'll look for ways to survive it. And with these uncomfortable situations or uncomfortable emotions, we seek relief. And we seek relief in the things that will work the fastest. Alcohol, drugs, screens, food, sex. And these things work. They provide the relief and help the person get through whatever uncomfortable situation they may be facing. They work, but they're temporary. They work, but they don't work long and they don't work well. In this way, we see if it were alcohol, that alcohol is not the problem, alcohol is the solution. It's the medicine that they're using to help them move through their discomfort. In my own story, I found myself in a place of such despair that I didn't want to live anymore. At least that's what I thought. I found myself thinking about suicide, ways out of the world. I didn't want to face the challenges that were in front of me. And alcohol would solve that, albeit temporarily. What I discovered later was that I didn't really want to die. I just didn't want to live the way that I was living, and I couldn't see a way through it. And I was intelligent enough to know that there was a way through. And that created this cognitive dissonance in that, like, there has to be a way through, but I can't access it. And I just felt full of shame, guilt, regret, and was completely lost and stuck. Life was almost unbearable in the way that it was, and alcohol gave me what I couldn't find anywhere else. It gave me the ability to bear that. Alcohol was my solution. And I really believe I even developed a spiritual relationship with alcohol. It was a higher power. It was my solution that then later became the biggest part of my problem. Our brain and our nervous system are constantly looking for threat. There's like a smoke alarm in there that will go off to alert us to any sort of danger that we might be facing. And that is something that we want to happen when we're facing something that is physically threatening or life-threatening for us or those we love or those around us. We absolutely want that. We want to be able to go into survival mode when automatically and unconsciously we want that part of our brain to hijack us and get us through to safety. That's meant to happen though when we're actually facing a life or physically threatening situation. When I look at most people that I work with, we find that there have been organized in a way through the experiences they've had, the way that they were shaped, the patterns that they've developed, that the smoke alarm will go off for situations that aren't actually threatening. They might be threatening down the road, but they're not immediately threatening. Like something with money, that if they don't get the promotion at work now, that down the road they may lose their job or not have money and not be able to pay their mortgage or their rent or not be able to buy food for their family. And those things might be true if they ran out of money, but for most of these people that's like 25 steps down the road. And so they're reacting to something in the future that could be threatening based on something that's happening now. Or the smoke alarm will go off for things that happen throughout the day, instead of, something that is going to cause real physical harm. It's a look from your spouse or a text from your boss that could immediately throw someone into a reactive mode that is akin to fight or flight. And what I'll say about these responses to perceived threat is that they are appropriate responses, just at an inappropriate time. Meaning, if there was a survival level threat that we were facing, these reactions would make sense. But because we're not facing that survival level threat, the reactions are way overboard. I'm gonna give you two scenarios. In scenario one, I'm in my office. It's on the fourth story of a building. There's other people in the offices around me. And I see a fire that nobody else sees. And this fire is gonna engulf the building. And the smoke alarms don't go off. So I take it upon myself. I run out. I go in the other offices. I grab people. I start yelling and screaming at them. I throw them down the stairs. I'm pulling them by the hair. And we all get down to the parking lot on the ground level, and we look up, and the building bursts into flames. And if we'd stayed in there any longer, we all would have died. In that scenario, everyone's gonna look at me as a hero. I saved their lives. They're gonna be high-fiving and applauding me and hugging me, and everyone's gonna be happy. That's an appropriate response at an appropriate time. Now, scenario two is I see a fire and I'm sure it's there, but there's actually not a fire. I'm seeing something that I perceive as a fire, but I do the same thing. I take the same steps. I see that nobody else sees the fire. There's no smoke alarm going off. And so I run into their offices. I grab them. I throw them down the stairs. I pull them by the hair. We get down to the parking lot and nothing happens. In that scenario, I'm not going to be a hero. In fact, I'm going to be seen as a crazy person, and they might even call the police. Scenario one was an appropriate response at an appropriate time. It was a survival level response to a survival level threat. In scenario two, it was an appropriate response at an inappropriate time. It was an appropriate survival level response at an inappropriate time because we were not facing a survival level. It's very simple. And a lot of the people I work with or have come across that suffer from addiction, whether that's to substances, alcohol, or behaviors, are often living at that heightened level of arousal, like looking for threats, seeing those fires everywhere. And when you are engaged in that level of nervous system engagement, meaning you're stuck in fight or flight, stuck in survival mode, it takes up an extraordinary amount of energy, and it becomes very uncomfortable. Not only because you're burning so much energy, but because it burns up relationships, it burns up their view of life. It becomes very challenging just to live. And eventually those people are gonna need to find some sort of relief. And that's where things like alcohol come in the picture. It can very quickly bring someone from a heightened level of arousal and survival mode to feeling some sort of peace and control. And it's not just alcohol, it can be substances or other behaviors and processes, but it works. In those times where I shared where I got to the place where I was suicidal or thought that I was suicidal, I could be in my home, not drinking, not wanting to drink, but also not wanting to live and actually contemplating ways to end my life. And then I would take a drink and another. And 2 hours later, I could be in a bar going from this sense of deep despair to this grandiose confidence where I would be trying to convince some woman how great I am. The level to which the alcohol would work to bring me out of that is, I know that it saved my life. And that's not something I'm recommending for people to do if they're in that deep despair, because it actually doesn't work over time. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant, and it adds to that depression. It just temporarily brings relief. And while it didn't work long and didn't work well and eventually added to the problem, I am able to look back and see where it absolutely 100% saved my life at times. And for that, I'm grateful. It gave me things where I could feel like I was connected to others, that I felt like I could fit in. It gave me a sense of internal peace. It would, for periods of time, allow me to block out all of the problems that I'd identified in my life. It brought me a sense of peace, and it became everything. It became a nervous system regulator, it became a social lubricant, and it became a survival mechanism. Eventually, it became just how I got through my day. And it started to take over everything. It went from something that was social early on in my life to something that was a little more regular, that just kind of helped alleviate some stress. And then it went to, much more frequent daily, that when I faced things that were very challenging, that were going to be ongoing, I absolutely needed it just to get through. And then it consumed everything throughout the day for multiple days at a time. And it really became the problem. While I could feel some sort of sense of ease and comfort internally, it was actually not helping anything that was external. In fact, it was delaying it and making it worse. It took more drinks to get the same effect. And there were more consequences, physical consequences, emotional consequences, consequences in relationships. It was this solution that became the problem. And it was kind of just descending down into this, pit of despair. And what I didn't know is that there was a way to begin ascending up into recovery. And that's what I see with so many people, that it starts off as something that there is no real issue with, and it just might be something that adds to their lives. They begin to descend down and experience more and more consequences, internal and external. And what I found in the years that I've been sober myself and as a therapist is that people don't have to wait until they're in that pit of despair. There's a way to start seeing these signs earlier, and you don't have to wait until you hit some sort of bottom where everything's gone. You can determine where your bottom is and start ascending up the other side of the curve into recovery, whatever that looks like for you. It took a long time for me to realize that the alcohol was actually now the problem. I said in the beginning it was the solution, which it was, but it's like it became this monster of itself that was driving all aspects of my life. And then the question is, why not just stop? And, I could stop for periods of time, but I couldn't stay stopped. And that's because even if I did stop, I didn't have another solution in place. So I would consistently return to that solution that was now problematic, but it was still the pattern that my brain had grabbed onto. Even in our society, I think people will say that addiction is a choice. Well, I don't even really want to argue that, because people, of course, have the ability to choose and have accountability and responsibility. But when something this powerful takes over, it is almost like that ability goes away. And even if they could choose just to stop, what's going on with them such that they continue to choose something that harms them and all of those around them? And I think the answer to that is in what I just said a few moments ago. Why choose harm? Because there's still that part of us that sees that there's some sort of relief that we're getting, even though we know the harm is coming. I don't think anybody that has gotten to the place where they're drinking alcoholically or doing drugs in a way that they're close to death often thinks that the next time that they do it is going to make everything better. They're not really thinking out in the long term. They're experiencing a level of discomfort and stress and despair in this moment that they're seeking relief from, even though the more consequences might be coming very quickly. The truth for most people in this situation is that it's keeping them alive until it doesn't. But the good news is, if the brain built this way of thinking and behaving, we can build something else. It has been shown that our brains do have neuroplasticity. We can retrain and rewire our brains such that we make different choices, that we're able to lean into discomfort and not allow it to drive us. The system may have learned that alcohol leads to some sense of safety. It can learn something else. It just takes time and practice. It's like I described myself or others descending down in this curve. That's like time and practice, using these kind of negative behaviors and coping mechanisms to get there, and it gets hardwired in there. Now, the other side of the curve coming up is also time and practice. And the more that we can practice some of these tools that we're going to discuss, then we can build a different way of relating to the discomfort and perceived threat in our lives. Big part of that other side of the curve in recovery is training the nervous system to recognize that feeling bad is not necessarily a threat, that we're able to feel bad and be safe. The two don't need to be collapsed. When that wave of uncomfortable emotion starts to rise up, rather than just jumping off of it and being crushed by the next wave, we can begin to raise our emotional capacity and distress tolerance to be able to rise with that wave. And the way that we do that is first to begin to name what we're experiencing, name what we're experiencing in our bodies, sensations, name what we're experiencing in our mind, the thoughts that we're having. Beginning to allow us to disidentify from the feelings, thoughts, and beliefs that we're having so that we can build a relationship with them and experience them. As the wave of any sort of negative emotion rises, we want to begin to learn to stay with it, not bail. To be able to stay with it and rise with that wave and then allow that wave to kind of settle out. Like a wave in the ocean rises and falls, all of our emotional experiences rise and fall. They aren't there, then they're gone. And so we want to be able to rise with those, especially the negative ones, because if we just get off of it, we're going to get crushed by the next one and crushed by the next one, and we're going to feel like we're drowning eventually. So we want to be able to rise with those emotions. And the way that we can do that is to name it. Tell yourself that you can experience it by breathing into it. Name it, notice it, be aware of the sensations in the body, and breathe. Stay with it. Don't bail. And as we do this, we begin to raise our capacity and build distress tolerance so that when uncomfortable emotions come, we stop automatically perceiving them as a survival level threat and we're able to get through them. In my work with people, I'm really teaching them how to feel bad, to be able to experience the difficult parts of life and not drive them to behaviors that will harm them or others. And then real recovery becomes being able to experience pain and not immediately reach for relief. And when we do this, we can begin to find relief in other ways. I'm going to talk about a few tools that you can use to be able to lean into the discomfort, to be able to allow you to kind of discern perceived threat from threat and make choices that move you in the direction you want to go rather than have you repeat your negative patterns. The first one is simple. Recognize, release, return. Recognize. When you notice that you're going into some sort of negative reaction, just name it, label it, then release. Give yourself some space between you and it. A great way to do this is through breathing, through some breath tools or some sort of movement or a behavior like calling a friend. So breathe for a few moments, go for a quick walk, stretch your body, or call a friend. And then return. Now that you've done those two things, I think you'll find that you're in a calmer state and the challenge that you're facing may not have gone away, but the need to be in this automatic reaction may have. And you'll be able to make a different choice or make a similar choice with a different reaction around it. This recognize, release, return helps me in several ways. A very specific one is, reacting in anger through text or email. And rather than just firing that off, I have this pause where then I can come back and have a communication rather than a reaction. Second tool is a really longer exhale. Often you'll hear people when someone's in some sort of distress to say, take a deep breath. And the challenge with that is when you just take a deep breath and you're focused on the inhale, that can have an activation of our sympathetic nervous system, which is where fight or flight is. What we really want to say is take a longer exhale. And of course, in order to take a long exhale, you have to take a deep inhale. Let each inhale be slower and deeper, and let each exhale be even longer and softer. I use this as I notice through the day that I'm somewhat activated, even like doing a video like this where I might make a mistake and I need to come back to what I wanted to talk to you about. I may have to take a break and a breath like this can really bring me back to center. Tool 3, this 1 minute pause. Before any urge for a behavior or an action, give yourself 1 minute and tell yourself that after this 1 minute pause, I can still engage in the behavior if I really want to. I can still pick up that drink. I can still scroll on the internet. I can still engage with that person. But give yourself a pause first. And in that pause, do something. Breathe, call a friend, go for a walk. And after that minute, when you come back, reassess. Do I still really need to do the thing that I wanted to do? I think most of the time people will find that that wave of uncomfortable emotion, if you really give yourself this pause, will have settled out. Maybe not all the way, but at least to a place where it becomes much more manageable. This tool helps me all the time. I learned it when I initially quit smoking cigarettes. I had tried the patch and the gum. I had tried many other ways to stop. And I finally said, you know what? I'm not gonna stop. I'm not quitting. I'm just gonna give a pause in between each time I think I need it when I pick it up. And in that pause, I promised myself that I would breathe and say a prayer, and then I would reassess. And as I did that, I found that I stopped almost immediately. I really committed to this practice, and not only was I able to stop smoking, but it brought me much more sense of peace and calm than the cigarettes ever did. It really helped me deepen my spirituality because I was breathing and praying a lot, but it became very easy and enjoyable. I wasn't in conflict with this idea that I had to stop forever. It was just that I needed to give myself this pause today. It is something that helped with almost anything. And if you get to the end of it and you give yourself of that pause and you still want to engage, give yourself another pause. Just keep giving yourself a pause. Eventually, that urge, that emotional discomfort, that wave of it will settle. So here's what I need you to hear. Addiction is not a moral failure. It is not weakness. It's your brain trying to protect you with the only tools it has. But we have the ability to give it better tools. Your brain was navigating with an old map, a map drawn in childhood, through trauma, in survival mode. We're not throwing it out. We're updating north. If you're caught in a loop you can't name, just know you're not broken. You're adaptive. You're not alone in this, and you're not as far from peace as you think. If you like this video and it helped you in any way, please subscribe to my channel and share with your friends. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.